Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. This podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. Today, we talk to Samantha McCoy, an attorney who successfully lobbied the United Nations to pass the first resolution addressing justice for victims of sexual violence. Samantha is an associate at Lakoski-Brookman, where she works in the appellate section. She's a graduate of St. Mary's University School of Law. She serves on the Austin Young Lawyers Association Board of Directors. She's also a licensed mental health therapist, an activist, and a legislative coach for the National Domestic Violence Collaborative. I'm so happy to chat today with Samantha McCoy. Thanks for being here, Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Samantha, you had a career before you became a lawyer, and you specialized in social work and got your undergrad and your master's in social work. Why did you make the pivot to becoming a lawyer?
Yeah, so during my undergrad, while I was pursuing my degree in social work, I was raped by a police officer. And during that experience was the first time that I had ever had any interaction with the legal system. And I was met with a system that was not set up to protect survivors or to support them in any way in a trauma-informed manner. And I reported to law enforcement like I was told to do, and thinking that the system would give me justice and that I would walk out knowing that the perpetrator was held accountable, and I did everything I could. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. I was instead met with a system that was very unkind. It was not trauma-informed. I was blamed. I was threatened with jail time. I was mocked. I was told I wasn't believed. I was made to call the perpetrator on the phone without any consult. And through that process, I kept telling myself, at the end of this will all be for something. I will get out of this and he will be held accountable. And I started attending therapy. I went into all of the police investigation questions that they wanted. And at the end of it, after 11 months, I was told that he was going to quietly resign from the position, but that he would not be held accountable in the criminal justice system. And I had this overwhelming rage, but at the time, I wanted to finish my undergraduate studies. I had, through that process, become homeless. I didn't have any place to live. I had lost my job because I had so much going on mentally and just through medical appointments, therapy appointments, and police questionings. They started showing up at my work, flashing their badges, embarrassing me at work, and ultimately ending my job. And so the school decided to set up a food pantry for me and provided me temporary housing and really supported me in a way that the justice system didn't. They protected me, and it's really the reason why I was able to finish my studies and obtain a protective order at the end of it. And I went on, I got my master's in social work at Syracuse University and continued on. I got my license. I started practicing as a mental health therapist. And after becoming a mental health therapist, I had the opportunity to work as a crime victim counselor in the courtroom. And I started counseling victims before and after they would get off the stand. And what was happening was I was seeing exactly what I went through all over again. The same lack of trauma-informed responses and the same injustices that I had faced on a much deeper level. And I had this realization that, I'm counseling these people who are going through something after it's happened, but that's not solving any of the issue, because at the end of the day, they're still forced to go into the system that's not set up for them. And it just struck a rage in me, and I decided to learn how the law worked and figure out how it could be changed. And so that's really what brought me into law school.
Well, and I think you don't have an uncommon story. The part that is really unique is that you took all that justified rage and that you are using it to make a difference for everybody else. And you've used it to make a difference in 3 different states and at the United Nations. So can you talk to us about how did you get involved with the United Nations resolution?
Yeah, so through my advocacy, once I passed 3 laws in 3 different states, I got contacted by a organization called RISE. They're based out of Washington, D.C., and they were working on a resolution and wanted my help. And so we partnered together. I was able to assist in the resolution, but also I got to testify in front of the United Nations. And we successfully saw that pass in September of 2022. And I got to be there live for it. So it was pretty cool. But that's how that came about.
Well, and you said it in such a humble way. You passed 3 laws in 3 different states. Do you want to talk about that process and how that worked? Because this is typically not a young lawyer's extracurricular activity.
Yeah, so actually it started in law school. My first year of law school, again, with the premise of my entire law career being based on figuring out how the law works, I realized fairly quickly that the way to do anything is to change the laws that are being interpreted. And so I started making a list of all of the injustices that I faced, everything that from the lack of support in the police investigation room to how I was treated at the hospital, to the fact that I couldn't even get a copy of my police report free of charge. I had to pay for my own rape kit, all of those things. And I made this list. And then I looked up what Indiana laws were and realized very quickly where the gaps. I can't say I was an expert. I didn't look at the law and know absolutely everything. But with that list of what injustices were prevalent that I experienced, I started cold calling and knocking on senators and representatives' doors. And I did it for the first year of law school and got no success. But that did not stop me. I was not going to stop. So I went back the second legislative session. They do their sessions every year. And so for my second year of law school, I went back and I did the exact same thing and wanted meetings and I wanted to speak with any senator or representative that would listen to me. And I finally ended up coming into contact with a senator who said, "This happened to my mom and I want to partner with you." And so even though we have very different political beliefs, and he was passing transportation codes at the time, because this thing that we both had, experience with, and we were so passionate about changing, he took some of those things that I had listed and took it to his team, and they were able to write the bill. Because again, I was a law student, I didn't know how to write legislative text, so. But that's how it started, and then it just was like, I transferred to St. Mary's and law school, and I was like, why not do the same in Texas? And that's kind of how it's transpired ever since, is just realizing the gaps that are in the states, and each state obviously varies quite a bit. And so it really sticking with the fact that justice shouldn't depend on your geographic location. And I just hope to continue to do it because there's still so much more to do.
Do you think that there are any states that already do this pretty well?
Yes. I mean, obviously, California is always pretty fairly leading. New York has great laws. Illinois, for the most part, too, has some pretty strong laws. Obviously, where we see, and Texas is catching up. There's a lot of great and wonderful advocates here in Austin who are passionate about survivors, and being able to partner with them, it's been very clear that they're ahead of the game. It's just getting the laws on the books actually caught up.
Samantha, how could our audience help out you and the organizations that you are assisting in changing these laws?
Absolutely. So the first and most important way is to just stay informed about what we're doing. A lot of the organizations that I have partnered with have newsletters that you're able to subscribe to, and that really fills you in on what's going on. A lot of the causes that we do, we always kind of do a change.org petition, and when you sign that petition, it automatically sends you updates as the legislation is passing through. I'm always open and happy to help somebody with a new idea and coach them through the process of what I know, and make sure that their legislation is successful. But TASA also is a wonderful organization that is local, and they love to get feedback from survivors who have been through this to be able to really refine the laws. I go to them with all my crazy ideas and thank them very much for the constant listening of my ramblings of everything that still needs to be done. But with RISE specifically, they also have a program called RISE Justice Labs where they sponsor youth on their own campaign, and they look for attorneys to coach and assist. And it's not necessarily that you need to be an expert in the legislative side, but if you can even just assist them in how the law works or what is feasible and what's not feasible and doing research, they're always looking for attorneys to volunteer for their programs as well. And currently I'm doing that with a young woman who's advocating in Washington, D.C. for a federal bill for HIV medication and equitable access to that. So there's just a variety of different causes that they try to tackle.
That's great. We'll put all of that in our podcast notes so that the listeners know how to reach out. And I've chatted with a few legislators on this podcast. And one thing that I think not all lawyers understand, because traditionally we're focused on what's happening in the courthouse, is how do things work at the legislature? So you mentioned in Indiana, it sounds like it took 2 sessions to get the laws changed, which is a little bit unheard of. Sometimes people have ideas and it takes them their whole career to get them passed. So can you talk a little bit about what it's like to have advocacy at the grassroots level and work with legislators and pitching ideas and how long that might take?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on how controversial your issue is. I mean, obviously, if you're going in with a very controversial issue and you don't necessarily have a well thought out solution, it can take quite a while. But if you come in with an idea and you've done your research and you know that this is just a gap in the system, I've found that there really is more of a positive response from representatives and senators because they're not having to do that research and that work on their end. You've already done it all for them. And so you're coming to them purely with the solution. And that's something that I've tried to refine as I've gone along from the start of just coming in with like, hey, I have all these problems, is really making sure I know what I'm talking about and what's on the books. And so, for example, this legislative session coming up in Texas, one issue that I'm advocating for is to expand rape kit retentions to 10 years. So right now we have a statute of limitations for 10 years for an adult rape, but we only are keeping and have a retention rate for those rape kits for 5 years. So within 5 years, they can be destroyed, but in 10 years, the survivor could bring the case, but then the rape kit would have been destroyed by then. And so I'm advocating for, based on the research that I've done, is to match that. So, and hopefully go up to 20 years. That would be wonderful. And also best practices around the United States, just doing, again, research on other states and what other states who are progressively moving forward in this area are doing. But hopefully that will, if we can at least match it to the statute of limitations, then these kids can be preserved for the entire time that a survivor can come forward. So coming with a solution and knowing the law helps quite a bit. But there are just sometimes, legislative sessions can be tricky. There are issues that, this last legislative session in Texas was really hard because so many hot button issues were coming up and other issues, although they're just as equally important, they're just not picking up the same attention, steam, and the representatives are focusing on those highly controversial issues that need to be addressed. So unfortunately, a lot of really great ideas get lost in that process.
And I'm sure that you have found this to be true when you're a constituent of the particular legislator. Their staff want to help you. They want to know it really is someone's job to read every letter, to answer every email. And so then when it's a great idea that is easily doable, like just change the statute from 5 to 10 years so that it matches. All the pieces come into place.
Right. Absolutely.
What are some of the organizations that have meant the most to you professionally or personally?
Yeah, so RAIN has definitely meant a lot to me. It's an organization that supports survivors of sexual violence, incest, rape, sexual assault, anything you can think of. But they have a program where they call it the Speakers Bureau. And so they give opportunities to really tell your story. And through that, I was actually able to be contracted with the New York Police Department and get to teach trauma-informed practices through my story to police officers, which is really hard at the time. But a lot of the officers were coming up after and they were like, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I wasn't trained this way. It just was never taught. And so that program specifically has put me in a lot of different positions that I don't think I would have been in had I not signed up for it. And even just teaching youth, it's meant a lot to me that, I've been able to speak to high school students specifically to teach them their rights. And if they do find themselves as a victim of a crime, what they can do and what's available to them. That's not something that I was ever taught. And if you look at the statistics, high school students are, astronomically getting the most assaults occurring to them. And they don't know what it is. They're not sure about consent. If somebody was drinking and it's underage, what can I do? Will I get in trouble? So with programs like with the Austin Young Lawyers Law-Related Education Committee, I created a program to go into high schools and teach high school students their rights. But none of that would have been possible had it not been for RAIN making me realize that I had a voice and that people needed this information. Other organizations that have meant a lot to me is obviously RISE. RISE being able to, they passed the federal Survivor Bill of Rights in Congress in 2016. I was not part of that, but through that movement and through their programs and their accelerator programs like I was talking about, they offer amazing teachings for youth to be able to pass their own laws. And I coach through them on I'm a regional legislative coach, and I'm able to talk to them about their bill and how to get it passed. And that has been a wonderful experience. I've met a lot of great people, and it makes me really hopeful because our youth have great ideas, and we just need to uplift them and support them and empower them, because once we do, I guarantee you things are going to get a lot better.
Well, and you also are in charge or are part of a very fun organization that I love, the Austin Young Lawyers Association. And so what advice would you give for young lawyers who are looking to get involved but don't know how?
Yeah, so for young lawyers, I would absolutely suggest joining Austin Young Lawyers Association. I think they're a wonderful group of people. I've been able to take the Law-Related Education Committee, and they really highlight and empower you to come up with your own ideas. And so this year for the Law-Related Education Committee, we, like I said, created the high school program where we brought teaching high school students their rights as survivors of violence. They have so many different activities. I mean, yoga, just networking and getting to know one another and building community.
What's next for you?
I will continue to lobby and try to pass laws. So I'm already in talks with a representative who passed one of my ideas to the Legislative Council here in Texas. So I'm really hopeful that we can get that bill passed. That's the one I was talking about, the statute of limitations being changed. And I'll probably try to throw in a few more ideas in there because you know me. And then I also have an active campaign in Indiana as well, expanding on the rights that we passed originally, so that the senator and I can make sure that the bill is more comprehensive than it is right now. But I don't think I'm going to stop. So that is it's what I love to do. And I will continue to coach and teach and hopefully uplift a lot of youth and colleagues to realize that we have a lot of power when we go to the Capitol. I mean, I've sat in a lot of hearings when I've been down to testify, and it just shocks me every time how few people show up to testify for bills. And anybody can sign up. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to be an expert. You can just truly care about the cause and go to lend your voice and your opinion. And I think if we all kind of paid more attention to what was going on, we could prevent negative bills from making it all the way through, because when smart and successful advocates aren't stepping forward to stop them, then we end up with bad results in the court. We end up with bad results for our communities, and it's harder to change them and to go back and fix something, especially the longer it's been the law.
When we see voter turnout in general is so low, so it's not a surprise that advocacy during session is low. But I am good at manifesting. I can see the future. And so one thing that I see for you is I think at some point your advocacy is going to turn into you being one of those legislators. So I have a coworker, and I have called her professor for years because she's so smart. And then she got hired as a professor. So I feel like now I have to start calling you Senator McCoy so that we put it in the universe, because you're referring to your Indiana senator, but I think at some point that is going to be you. So I say that's what's next for you. And we can just have the term next be sort of undefined of how long that is.
Love that.
Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you for talking about this very important issue. And I'm sure the audience is going to line up to help out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.